Margins, gross profit margins. Okay, cost of labor sales. This is also a huge deal. What that means is, what are we paying our technicians? The manufacturers want us to have as many A and B technicians as possible, right? And yet the part of our business that we have the biggest, that we lose, our competition, the aftermarkets and independents, only do B and C work, right? For the most part, that's the work we say that we're losing. And even if we start to retain a higher percentage of that, we don't have our technics. So what's happening, and this is also the effect on discounting. It's one of the reasons our effective labor rates are under such attack. We might do a good job starting to retain our customers, but we might be having our A and B techs do C and D work, and you know, when it really nets out, we might as well not even be doing it, because we'll basically break even or lose money on that particular repair order. So we really start showing people how you've got to match your labor rates. So this is nothing against those guys who have been working for 15, 20, 25 years and who earn those raises. They've gone through training, they've invested in the tools, you know, and sometimes we'll do deals where, you know, you'll just have a certain labor op, like tire, four-wheel alignments or something like that with new technology, where it used to take 2 hours and now it takes 20 minutes to 25 minutes with new technology. We're still paying these guys, you know, at the 2 hour, the hour and a half rate. So there's a lot of things to do to break the pieces down and say, we've got to do this. If we're going to get the return on investment we need and deserve, we've got to break it down. So then again, these are just ways where some of these benchmarks and comparative data come out. Parts markups and margins. You know, we kind of laugh about this because this has nothing to do with, you know, so many of our parts actually cost 50% or less that sometimes you'll end up with 500 or 800% markup on a part just to get a decent, you know, markup. And everything, you know, when you analyze it is a percentage, or a percentage of gross, or an expense is a percentage of gross. And that's something that you can just go in. Discounting, that has a big attack on effective labor rates. One of the reasons is, it's not, you know, it's like Grant said, even though he was talking about vehicle salespeople, you know, our service advisors are service salespeople. And if we're asking them to interface with too many customers per day, and we still are putting pressure and expectations on them to sell menus and to upsell and all this stuff, well, guess what? That's where discounting comes in. I mean, they don't have the quality of time to build a relationship, to do the price-value relationship on the actual service. And what happens is we might get the menu sold, but, you know, or we end up having specials and we'll have a service advisor discount already discounted work. Okay? Then again, we shoot our margins. So personnel productivity and service. Okay? Domestic 96, import 12, 17. Again, you'll always see the trend on the high lines. Labor gross and hours per tech, labor gross per advisor, parts gross, and total dealership employee. That's that. This used to be nirvana right there if you could get to 10,000. And now, because so many of the import brands sell way more volume and have way more retention, that number has moved up, and of course you can see the highline imports. If anybody, just because I saw this gentleman taking notes in the picture, anybody who will give me their card, I will make sure you get a copy. We will email you a copy of this when it's all said and done, so you don't have to go back and try to download your phone. We'll give you the real thing. Expense control. The big three expenses should account for no more than 50% of your gross. So we call the big three personnel expense, advertising expense, and interest expense. Of course, personnel expense, it's interesting, but you know, that was Grant's. He wasn't talking about expenses, but he said, he was just talking about the value. So we can call that personnel expense, or we can call it personnel investment. But basically is, if our people don't have the processes to operate in, then we might as well call it expense. If they're coming in, we open up the doors and they go to work and they work hard and they're there, and our expenses are out of whack, and our grosses are out of whack, and our inventories are out of whack, and we don't have, you know, high levels of accountability and processes, you know, we are really kind of missing the boat. So personnel expenses at 40%, advertising expense at 10% of gross, and inventory, if managed well, particularly in this low interest rate environment, we should believe, and we see so many dealers on our composites are actually running a credit balance in floor plan this year, in the last few years. So asset management. Okay, this has to do with pre-owned inventory, day supply, retail cost. Okay, you can see very high day supply, and I'll show you why that is, because this is what's really recommended. 45 days supply is the industry target, 30 days for large groups. We spend a huge amount of time with our dealerships, used car related, talking about the percentage of their inventory older than 30 days. And we don't have time, I could talk for hours just on the used car department. In fact, I do. That's not the point of that. And that's the biggest place, because most dealerships own their used vehicle inventory outright, and it's so badly mismanaged that they end up having usually 2/3 of their inventory dollars older than 30 days. And we have a metric we call that the probability of sale, and we're talking about a profitable sale, that in the first 30 days we've got 65 to 70% opportunity to sell a used vehicle at its largest gross profit without a compilation of daily holding expenses. So we ask you, what is your target? Do you have a target of day supply? And then at the other end of that, do you have a hard turn policy? Does your management team know that? Do you know what your core inventory, we call a model inventory? We spend a lot of time talking with our used car managers, saying let's break apart what your cars are. Let's go into the historical data and find out what a model inventory would be, so you will know with your eyes wide open in the future, what your best-selling cars are, what the cars you should avoid, what the cars you should price most competitively from the moment you get them. Fixed coverage. Everybody know what fixed coverage is? Fixed coverage is the amount that the service department generates in gross profit to cover the total dealership expenses. And we take out variable selling expenses from the sales department. So 100% would be good, but this is, you can see in this case, and this is why it's such a struggle, benchmark in a lot of departments, can be a really big number, because 100% what the goal would be. So benchmark, of course, is going to be bigger than the group average, but still, in the high lines, on the average benchmark, is still 75%. And there's a lot of dealerships that have a really high fixed coverage during the last 4 years that really weathered the stores better. And probably the most two exciting classes I teach, in NCMI, is used vehicles and service, because that's where we can make the biggest impact in net profitability. And service, ironically, I grew up as a salesperson. And when I got really, really familiar with the fixed operations and started understanding it, and now I teach it, it's really where we have the biggest opportunity. If you think about how many customers come through our service drive per day compared to how many people come onto our showrooms, and what the effects are and what the expectations we have, that's how high up is on that. So the takeaways are...
Is that the same as service absorption? Same thing?
I'm sorry, Chris.
You said that's the same as service absorption, is that right?
That's what fixed coverage is. Yes, or service fixed absorption. Exactly. So the takeaways, I apologize for going so fast. Are you comfortable with your numbers each month? Do you know where you stand in relation to your peers? Are you leaving profit on the table? Are you prepared and equipped to address your opportunities? Any questions from all this? And I couldn't really go too deep into anything that I normally get, hours and hours to do in my other environment. Yes, Chris?
I do have a question. What % of the top 100 dealer groups are using NCM in some way? Yes.
You know what? If we know that, which I suppose somebody does, I don't know that. But you said something last night that there's a perception that the best, most proactive dealers take advantage, and I'm not just saying of NCM, of the opportunities. And that's kind of what this whole conference is around, hopefully the biggest players who are helping dealers today, which that's what we do at NCM, are proactive.
I rarely have talked to anyone that had, several, 5, 6, 7 dealerships or more that is not using MCM. So I was just curious if it's a 90% or 95% of the top 100 are using NCM in some way.
I will get you that answer. I don't think, we don't brag too much. That's probably wouldn't sound good if I do that, but maybe our marketing department does.
How about what percent of dealerships, just overall, how many dealerships belong to NCM overall?
We have, the way we talk internally, we have 4,000 financial statements.
Right.
So that's not necessarily 4,000 dealerships, because some groups, like we do some proprietary work for AutoCon. They have 211, well, depending on which day of the week it is, so there could be 200 in that.
And all the public, Sonic, pretty much every one of them use NCM.
Yeah. And sometimes they're proprietary. Proprietary means they come to us, they want their numbers crunched, and we give them composites, and then sometimes we'll come out. They won't necessarily be in a 20 group. They are the group.
Yeah.
So we'll come in and do different projects for them. But they very much, even more so, because I did an interesting project for AutoNation a couple months ago because they were putting the service advisor position under a microscope, deconstructing it, and they just know what the value is. And it was very interesting because they have Wall Street to deal with at one end of the spectrum that most of us don't, but at the other end of the spectrum, they have exactly who we have to deal with every day, and that's the customer. So customers, whether you're an AutoNation store, that GM, that service manager, that sales manager at an AutoNation store, that they don't have it any easier to retain that customer. But they've got Wall Street together and going, to you, but maybe just as well. It's how well do we take advantage of some of the things that can be right in front of us. So that's the takeaway. Is a benchmark is just something to shoot at. We didn't make it 100% because people would go, well, why bother? We're never going to be this dealer or that dealer, or I don't have that brand, or I don't have that marketplace. But we always thought that 75th percentile would be a realistic target to shoot for.
It's a seed.
Huh?
It's a seed in school.
Exactly. Well, hopefully it's at least a B-. Okay, so if anybody is interested in getting a copy of this, please give me your business card, and we'll get it to you. Please feel free to take the brochures if you aren't already clients. Thank you so much for coming.